The Ohio teenager making national headlines for going against his parents' wishes and getting vaccinated. 10 states have reported cases of measles. Ohio isn't one of them. But News5's Jesse Schultz found out that doctors are concerned it may just be a matter of time.
The numbers speak for themselves. Last year in the U.S., we had 372 cases of the measles. This year already, from January 1st to last week, 101 cases. I found this outbreak is pushing those on both sides of the vaccination debate further in their corners. Stephanie Stock is a working mom of 2 boys in Northeast Ohio. She's also a mom who now chooses not to vaccinate those boys.
My oldest son, he had a vaccine reaction at 4 months. And my doctor told me, it was a coincidence. These things happen sometimes. I knew something was very wrong.
Her son is okay, but she stopped vaccinating after that.
Not vaccinating is like dry patches of grass. And the more dry patches of grass, the more likely you could have a fire.
In order for herd immunity to work, about 90 to 95% of the community needs to be vaccinated. CDC numbers show last school year in Ohio, 92.1% of kids received their measles, mumps, and rubella shots. But experts say just because we're in the range doesn't mean we're safe from an outbreak. It's just a flight away.
You have people coming in from outside. And so all you need is a few children who are not immunized to be affected, and then they will spread it to other children.
Ohio's percentage of kindergartners with a vaccination exemption last year was 2.6. That's higher than the national median. Parents in Ohio schools can opt out with exemptions for medical, religious, or philosophical reasons. And for parents like Stock, she says it's their right to do so.
It is every parent's own responsibility to protect their own child. We cannot in America be deciding that we're protecting communities and that we're sacrificing our children at the expense of a community.
But for doctors, the concern that diseases we've considered eradicated will come back continues to grow.
The 3 most important things for child health in the last 150 years has been clean water, sanitation, and vaccines. That is what made the difference for children living to see their first birthday and their 10th birthday.
Lawmakers in both Washington and Oregon, states that have seen outbreaks this year, are considering ending philosophical vaccine exemptions for schools. Meanwhile, in Ohio, if there is a measles outbreak at a school, students who have an exemption have to stay home for 21 days after the last known case clears up. Jesse Schultz, News 5.
We need from.
Okay.
So, first, you just look at me the whole time. Just say and spell your first and last name for me.
Okay, Stephanie Stock. And it's S-T-O-C-K. My first name is S-T-E-P-H-A-N-I-E.
Great. And how would you want to be labeled? I know anti-vaxxer is not.
No. I am the president of Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom. Okay. I am a physical therapist assistant, and I am the mom of a child that suffered a vaccine injury.
Great.
So.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about, why you are a parent who chose to not vaccinate.
Okay, well, there were 5 main reasons. The first one was that my oldest son, he had a vaccine reaction at 4 months. And my doctor told me, it was a coincidence. These things happen sometimes. But he was a breastfed baby, and he had been having regular bowel movements. And the day he was vaccinated, he stopped having bowel movements for 10 days. And he cried quite a bit, and he just had a change in his mood. So I knew something was very wrong because he was exclusively breastfed. So I decided that I wanted to look into the vaccine science. I had heard, on the news, we've heard different various things. There might be some problems with vaccines. So I decided to take a look. And my husband at the time worked at a biotech pharmaceutical company. And so he was a supervisor in production manufacturing there and worked with FDA and so he was pretty well versed in science and what it would take to get a product to market, a pharmaceutical product. So when we investigated the safety studies, we found that in most of the cases there was an aluminum adjuvant or there was another vaccine as a placebo. Well, we know the gold standard is an inert substance for placebo. That means like a sugar pill or saline or something like that. So seeing that was really disturbing. My ex-husband said, wow, Stephanie, there's no way we're vaccinating our kids after seeing these studies. I mean, we couldn't get these drugs to market with these kinds of safety studies. So that was a big thing for us. We also found the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act, which gave vaccine manufacturers complete immunity from liability from their products. So in the early 80s, we saw about 6 doses of vaccines on the schedule. And now that they've got immunity, we're at 72 doses by the time a child is 18. So when liability goes away, a lot of times the drive for safety or bringing forth a better product can drop, as we know in many other avenues. So that was a concern. Then also, there was section 13.1 of the majority of the package inserts. It states there that they've never been tested for carcinogenic, mutagenic, or effects on fertility. And we vaccinate about 4 million children a year in the United States. And I believe at age 1 year old to 15, cancer ranges between the second and the fourth leading cause of death in children. So when I see that a product that's given to that many children a year doesn't have safety studies for carcinogens, doesn't have safety studies for mutagenic effects, and fertility rates, or I don't know if you've looked at the statistics on that, but those rates have gone down significantly. So this is a real concern for parents, valid concern, why you would want to look into vaccines when you see that. And then also in 2011, and this came later, but the Supreme Court ruled that vaccines were, quote, unavoidably unsafe. So I think that was kind of an alarming thing coming out of, from our Supreme Court. So those were the primary reasons that I have questioned vaccines, and that a lot of parents question vaccines and have made the choice to either stop vaccinating or to not vaccinate in the first place.
What was the vaccination that your son had a reaction to?
Well, it's hard to say because they get so many in one visit, and that's a major issue as well. The one that he had that was different that time than the previous time was rotavirus, which is a live virus vaccine, and that it has to do with preventing diarrhea. So again, you're looking at the gut. So my suspicion, since he did not have bowel movement, was that perhaps there was a relation there between the live virus of that. But there wouldn't be any way for me to know because he got so many at one time.
Right. So before that, I mean, you obviously were just getting vaccinations and getting what your doctors were telling you.
Correct.
You needed to do as a mother for your kids.
Yeah. It's really hard in our community. The majority of us were vaccinating. We get this title anti-vaccine, and we aren't anti-vaccine. We are vaccine risk aware because we were put in a position where we had a child that was harmed. So, to badger a parent, to put them down, to threaten them. I mean, you'd be surprised the things that we've heard. There's a lot of bullying really that goes on, and we are just moms trying to protect our children to the best of our ability. And I would want any parent to do that, and I would certainly not belittle them for making a decision to protect their kids. So,
I think one of my questions was, why is that the right? I mean, like other parents are basically sitting there saying, they should vaccinate their kids to protect my kids. I mean, what do you come back to saying? Like, why is that your right as a parent to do?
Well, I think first and foremost, it is every parent's personal job to protect their own child. I mean, we love our community, we love our friends, we love our family, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for our own children and ourselves. So I will always stand by that. I will stand by any parent's right to make whatever medical decisions they feel is right for their child based on their child's history, based on the knowledge of their child and past events and things like that, their sensitivities. So, I support a mom's right to vaccinate if that's what's best for her child. I support a parent's right to decline if they've had an injured child or they're worried that their child would be injured because of family history. So, Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom, that's our main focus, is informed consent and making sure that the parents retain the right to accept or decline any medical procedure, including vaccines, because it's a medical product, so with risk.
I know you homeschool now. Did you ever have any? I guess you went to a private school, so you might not have had the same issues then.
No, actually, the private school we went to, except they follow vaccine exemption law. If you take state funding, you really are supposed to follow state law for that. So we have philosophical reasons of conscience, what they call it in Ohio, and religious and medical exemptions. So I just cited the ORC code, took a little note into school, and turned it in. There were some others there that were non-vaccinating parents as well, so they had seen the form before. But there have been a lot of parents that have contacted me saying that they're being told they don't have a right to an exemption. They're being told their child can't go to prom, they're not going to get a parking permit. I mean, just ridiculous things that the schools are telling them that that they can't do because they're not vaccinated, and that is not fact. We have state law protecting that right. So I didn't have an issue, but many parents do.
Okay. I just want to look at the questions. I have said, Jason, that I'm asking the ones that you're prepared for.
Yeah, you've almost. I think you've almost asked them all.
I mean, with this measles outbreak, it seems like, you know, more and more people are kind of saying, you know, you guys kind of answered this already, but you guys are, you know, putting other children at risk. Do you feel like you're doing that, or do you feel like you guys are relying on herd immunity? I mean,
I don't rely on anything but my parenting skills. I take charge of my children's health. I decide what they're going to eat. I decide what medications they're going to take. And again, that it comes back to the parent. It is every parent's own responsibility to protect their own child. We cannot in America be deciding that we're protecting communities and that we're sacrificing our children at the expense of a community. So I would never support that philosophy. I will always support individuals' rights and parental rights for your own child. You know, and it's not to be insensitive. I would feel horrible for anyone who lost a child to a disease. And I also feel horrible for anyone who has lost a child because of a vaccine or has been injured. And I will say, and I will always say, that a vaccine-injured child is of no less value than an immune-compromised one. I don't care what the situation is with any outbreak. That remains fact. Every child is equally as valuable.
I mean, do you have any concern that these diseases will come back? I mean, you don't have to answer these questions for me.
No, you know, we've had disease in history. All throughout history, we've had disease. I think the important thing to look at is the death rate for those diseases, the best way to prevent them. In the case of measles, I believe there's 54 in the Washington outbreak, and the death rate for measles is 0.2%. So that is a very, very low death rate. I think we need to put that into perspective. We have things like, for example, tuberculosis. It's about a 43% death rate on tuberculosis. And in 2017, there were over 9,100 cases of TB in the United States. We have a vaccine for TB, but it's not used. The media has not discussed that at all. So I think when we're looking at things like illness, especially in children, when the CDC states, and the CDC Pink Book states that measles is basically a relatively mild childhood illness. So why we're getting so afraid, and not to attack the media, but we see that in the media a lot. There's a lot of fear-based around disease. And it all depends on how, what you know about the disease, what you know, even things like polio. Again, 0.2% for death rate. 95%, according to the CDC, is either asymptomatic or they have like mild cold symptoms for a week. So when we put that into perspective and we actually look at the science and we look at what the CDC says, where there isn't a lot of risk in a lot of these diseases that everyone is afraid of coming back. So again, I would encourage people to look at the science, look at the statistics for mortality, look at the statistics for possible complications for each of those diseases, and then look at other diseases that may or may not have a vaccine and have a much higher death rate, and we hear nothing about those. And so that part I don't understand. Maybe you guys want to do a segment on TB or something. But you know, so that is what I would say. You know, I'm not really afraid of the diseases coming back. The natural childhood diseases, they've been around. My mom went through measles. If you ask anybody, you know, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, if you say the deadly measles was back, they're going to look at you like, what in the world is she talking about? We all had that and we're fine. So, you know, not to minimize anyone who has possibly lost a family member to a childhood illness, because there is that 0.2%, just like there is with vaccine injury. And so we can't minimize either side. That's why I always go back to choice, because you have disease that can cause death, you have vaccines that can cause death, and that has to, again, fall in the hands of the parent.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered. I probably went even further than I needed to go, but